Well, it's really fun to be back. Today is managing independent learning during literacy. So that will be our main focus for until 4:30. Could all be here, and it's fun to be together again. So our objectives for, my objectives for my little mini session, which is going to last about 35 minutes until we go to our breakouts. Identifying independent learning during guided reading. We haven't gotten into the guided reading training yet, but it's really important that you establish consistent procedures and routines for your students so you can easily implement guided reading into your classroom. So that's why we're doing this as a prerequisite prior to getting into benchmarking and guided reading. Identifying meaningful literacy stations during guided reading, and discussing the importance of management and organization of independent learning stations. So as I just said before, we started off with balanced literacy and the gradual release of instruction. And I think for a lot of you, that might have been some review. Maybe you took away a few new things about the gradual release and the difference between modeled, shared, guided, and ultimately the end goal is independent. And we also talked a little bit about the importance of moving through the gradual release of instruction with literacy, with the realms of writing and reading. And so today we're talking about the independent learning during guided reading. And then the next focus areas will be benchmarking and really digging deep into the guided reading lesson and what that should really look like. So on your handout, on the front of your handout, there is a framework there. And that framework came from this book. It's Faunus and Pinnell's most newest book, Guided Reading. Do any of you have this or have you seen it? I don't know if, I think we do have a few administrators here, and if this is something that you really want your building to get on board with guided reading, and I know you're all here because you want to learn more about guided reading, this book is awesome. It's awesome. They had another book, it had a white cover that's been out for years, for more than 10 years, that was just a white cover guided reading, and now they just came out with the new book this past year. So it's really good. It's very user-friendly. So the last 3 chapters all cover management and how to get stations and centers going in your classroom. And they specifically discuss primary, moving through the primary grades into the intermediate grades all the way up to 8th grade on how to get effective stations running. So I just wanted to do a shout out for this book. You could even have one book in your building to use to share. Maybe Donna could get us some books. See, I can say that while she's out of the room. So on the cover of that packet there, there's a framework, and this comprehensive design offers opportunities for language and literacy learning with an underlying coherent theory of the reading and writing process. Instructional routines are built on understandings about learning and how students develop as readers, writers, and language users. So it's a little dark up front. We can turn more lights on if needed. But if you look at that, go ahead and look to see where guided reading falls. One side of the framework is all about, after you see the interactive read aloud at the top and you move down, guided reading comes on one side and then we have the writing on the other. So do you see where the guided reading falls? Okay, so it really falls after you've gone through that modeled and shared. It's really important to understand that you need to model and share your skills and objectives under the literacy umbrella before you get into guided lessons, because the guided is really all about reinforcing those strategies that you're teaching to your students. So the guided is really all about listening in and reinforcing what kids are doing. And so that's the ultimate goal of our sequence of training. So I just kind of wanted to show you where that fits in. And if you look at that framework, you can think about what parts of that framework you might have in place or parts that you really are working on. A lot of it is a work in progress. And it does look different in a kindergarten room versus a 7th grade classroom. So hopefully we'll hit those areas as we move through our trainings. But I really like this framework, and I wanted to share that with you. On the very back side of your packet, there is a note-taking guide, and you'll see this quote from Fountas and Pinnell up at the top. It should be the very last page. Do you have it? Yes, there's a circle, like a bubble up on top. If you want to fill in the blanks, you may do so. Independent learning requires designing an organized environment that supports students' literacy learning and becoming independent and responsible. So it's really all about releasing the responsibility to the students during that literacy time. So students are engaged in meaningful activities, reinforcing those strategies and skills that you've taught them. And so the question is, how do I make this all work? How can my kids really be working independently while I'm engaged in my guided reading group? And so we'll talk about some of those strategies. But it's all about kids being responsible and taking ownership of their learning while you're working with your small group. There's also a rubric back on the second page. And the very top part of that rubric comes from the guided reading book, and it's a little self-assessment. It's on the back side of that framework we looked at. The print is a little small. But right there it says getting started classroom management. So I want you to look at that rubric and think about, where do you fall, those of you that are classroom teachers, where do you fall right now when you think about and reflect upon your management system? This is just thinking and kind of looking at that rubric. We're not gonna really discuss this right now or jot anything down. I just want you to look at the scope and sequence there of that continuum and think about where you fall when you're teaching your students reading. And if you do have small groups in place, how is it going? Maybe you're not there yet. But just kind of look that over and be thinking about where you fall right now. Okay, we're going to keep on going. So thinking about the time frames that you can incorporate when you're teaching reading to your students, the time frames for guided reading and the time frames for when you are teaching out of your Basel program or whatever program it is that your building uses to teach the scope and sequence of literacy skills. It's important to make sure that there is enough time within your literacy block to provide modeled and shared lessons along with small group guided lessons for all students. Now in our district, it's pretty much a rule for us that we try to follow as best as we can, that we need to meet with every student every day in our classroom for guided reading. Now what can change, what the variable may be, is the time. So if I have students that are exceeding grade level expectations and they're reading far above my grade level, I may only check in with those students because those students are much more independent. I can give them projects, I can give them higher level comprehension things. And so I may not need to meet with my high group for a full 15, 20 minutes a day for guided reading. Who do you think we really need to get to every day for guided reading? Turn and tell the person next to you. Who do we need to get to every day? The students that are reading below grade level, right? Are really low kids. I mean, guided reading is good for all students. And I think our kids that are really higher level learners and they are higher ability students, I think you can do fabulous things with guided reading with kids that are all levels. And so guided reading is not a remedial program. And it's not even a program, I shouldn't say that. It's a support. And so the support is good for all students, not just students that are low, or students that are on, it's good for all students, the whole paradigm. And so, is Christine in here? I don't know if she left. So the teacher that's going to be working with 2nd through 4th grade this afternoon, the pictures and video come from her classroom, and I know she's here. So she has just her day up on the wall, and just to give you an idea of how it might look in a primary classroom, she's got an hour, and she's got it separated just because of how her day works out. An hour in the morning where she does more of her whole group teaching, where she's doing her modeled and her shared lessons. And then in the afternoon, she works with her rotations. And she has about an hour and a half for her rotations, where she's working with her guided reading groups. And when she comes in, I'll make sure to that she can reiterate that. So I'm giving you the exact information. But sometimes it's really nice to have reading in the morning. We all want to do our reading in the morning because kids are fresh, but our schedule doesn't always work that way. This is a primary classroom. I will tell you, 3rd grade and above, our minutes are shorter for literacy. So we don't have as many minutes for small group. I think they're changing that actually for next year, but she's able to really try to get all of her groups in along with her lessons, her scope and sequence from the basal in the morning. So that's just an example of how it could look. Now, in the guided reading book, Faunus and Pinnell here that I showed you, they talk a lot about literacy stations, independent learning time while you're pulling groups. They talk a lot about the 4 activities a day where students are engaged every day. So there are many ways you can do this. The kids don't always have to be over in their little stations. Sometimes kids could be working through 4 activities a day at their own pace, or possibly it's choice sessions, whatever works best for you in your teaching scenario. Some kids, I know, some teachers where some kids will be at their desk moving through their activities. So students working at their desks or tables, they're working actively at tasks that promote literacy learning, and they choose to do tasks in any order or in order that you suggest. So it can really go both ways. It's what's going to work best with you and your students at this point in time. And the most of what we'll be talking about this afternoon is the Daily 5. Put your thumb up if you've heard about the Daily 5. Put your thumb up if you've incorporated Daily 5 in your classroom. Okay, some of you, great. So please feel free to chime in also in your small group session. So the Daily 5 came out, and 2 authors, Gail Boucher and Joan Moser, and they call them the sisters, came out with this book, The Daily 5. This is the older book that I have. The newer one is there. The older one looks like this. There's the newer one, and I was watching a webinar the other day as I was kind of researching, trying to get more information for our session today, and a gal said that you really want to get the newest book. If you want to read up and do some more research on the Daily 5, the newest book really goes greater into detail on management and also how it can look at more in the intermediate grades. So I highly recommend this one. The other one is great too. It gives a good overview, but people recommend getting their newest book. So it's really a literacy framework that guides both student and teacher behaviors to create a classroom of engaged and independent readers and writers. The Daily 5 includes read to self, writing, reading to someone, word work, and listening to reading. That's the 5, the Daily 5. There is an article that I gave you. It's actually off the web that I found, and I really liked it. You know what? I'm not going to have you read it now. If we have time at the end of our session, I'll have you read it because I really want to go through the 5 stations, and we have some time. You can read it, or you can read it as after you leave. So a big part of Daily 5 is getting the management system in place. It's a lot of management before kids even start getting into their rotations. Where are the kindergarten and 1st grade teachers in here? So I'm going to highlight you because you know about this, because you know how important it is to practice the management, not to say other classroom teachers in higher grades don't understand this, but this is really your life in kindergarten and first grade. And the first, your first few months of school, this is what it's all about. A lot of you are thinking, no, I'm still doing this in January. It's all about practicing after holiday break. It's like, okay, we got to practice again. Remember, Johnny, you need to move to that station at this time. So really practicing and setting up the daily 5, or whatever your system is going to be, or whatever your system is. And you want to make it simple. You don't want it to be so complex. When I started teaching, I spent hours and hours at night cutting out little laminated things and making laminated folders of games and all these things, which they're good, but I spent a lot of time doing that. And I think a lot of it was meaningful, but the daily 5 can be done without cutting out and making all these handmade games. It can be really simple. So managing your classroom too is really important. And Christine, did she come back in here? She's not in here. Okay, so she does this in her room and I love it. Every group of desks, and she uses this for the whole day, she has these bins. And so within the bins, there's writing supplies, there are journals or books that they use, and then their book bags. So in guided reading in the daily 5, or if you have kids reading, doing sustained silent reading or reading to self, your kids have their own little book bags or book bins. She keeps it all in one area for those students that sit in that area in her classroom. She even has these little, I'm sharpened, I'm broken, the pencils are all organized. So having a nice, clean, organized area so kids know their expectations and know where to keep their stuff, that always makes a lot of sense, especially in preparation for your management during literacy stations. I don't know why it's not going. Okay, having a work board. So when you have a work board, include all students' names in their groups. Picture icons are really nice to show what type of station that the students will work at, and will help with the routine. Having a flexible way of rotating the tasks and students' names on the board to provide variety and ensure that all students experience a range of literacy events across the week. You really don't want, you would want to refrain from kids going to that same station every day or doing the same thing every day the same way. You do want to change it a little bit. So every day, perhaps the students wouldn't hit all those daily 5 rotations. They might hit 3 or 4 of them and then also see you for their guided reading group. And once again, I cannot stress it enough that the routines and transitions really need to be taught extensively. It's not like you can talk about it one day or even 2 days and boom, move right into it. We have there's some committees that wrote up the first 20 days of school, getting kids ready to move through the daily 5, and I have all of those lesson plans that I can share with you. We have them separated by grade clusters, and it does go all the way up through 6th grade. So it really walks you through creating anchor charts and those kinds of things. So we can talk about maybe how to get those out to you if you're interested in seeing the plans on how to get started. But that's part of getting your workstations ready and your anchor charts and so forth. Christine's room, this is what she does. It's all about moving like a clock. And even in her room, it's set up where the kids are, their tables are set up. And then when they move for rotations, they move around the room like a clock. And so she's got her, for this one, for daily 5, for this, this round of rotations, she has word work, read to self, her table, technology, and then working on writing. So this is where the students will begin that day, and then they'll continue to move when it's time to rotate. And these are just different visuals on how people might set up their rotations in their room. Maybe it's by color, using different kinds of picture icons, especially in the primary classrooms, is really important and helps students to understand where they need to be. I've even seen teachers where they actually take pictures of the stations in their classroom, and that's what they use on their board. There is a sheet that came from the guided reading book in your packet with it's really small, the little icons, but just to kind of show different kinds of icons and ideas for stations. And then once again, when you get into the intermediate classrooms, your icons might look different. And their workstations might look different as well. So the Daily 5, what is it? It's a literacy block routine. It's really explicit teaching and practicing of classroom behaviors and incorporating that management piece, stamina building for sustained reading and writing, and it's independent learning focused. What it is not, a teacher-driven model that relies on busy work, including worksheets and workbooks. So students would not necessarily be working out of worksheets in their workbooks. Even from the Basel program, it's not a time where they're just sitting and doing kind of worksheety types of things. It's not a huge financial and time investment, and it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Anchor charts and large charts created are really important in the Daily 5. So as you're moving through the Daily 5 and introducing them for each of those stations, it's important to have anchor charts that you make with the students. You want the students to be involved in creating that anchor chart. It's going to be more meaningful for them, and they're going to use them more rather than always using the store-bought charts in the classroom, even though those are really fun too. I think sometimes you can find some really neat stuff to hang in your class, but for the Daily 5, you really want the kids to be involved in creating the charts. So I'm going to move through the Daily 5, and then when we do our breakout session, we'll dig even deeper and look at it at that grade level, that range. So independent reading, and there's a note-taking guide. If you want to take notes, you can. You don't have to, but it's there if you want to jot down some notes. Children learn how to select books and enjoy reading them silently. As you saw, Christine has those little bags that she uses. Book boxes are nice too, so kids can keep their self-selected books in their bag or box. So when it's time for independent reading, they can get their bag and they can go somewhere on the floor or read at their desk. When you get into the intermediate grades, it does become more of those novels and chapter books that you're reading, and they're doing more perhaps using an interactive notebook and asking higher level comprehension questions and more of a reader's response when you look at the higher level. So from the Daily 5, they talk about the 3 ways to read a book and really sharing this I pick. So it's about finding a book with purpose, interest, comprehension, and word knowledge that's going to match the student's reading ability. And really having an array of reading material accessible for your students. They can use their library books for this time too, but having some various types of books that kids can read during Read to Self. You want it to be a meaningful time. You don't want it to be a time where kids are messing around and rolling on the floor, because sometimes that does happen in Read to Self. So you really have to think about how can kids be in control of themselves and what they're doing during that independent reading time. Some teachers will give kids tasks to self book or have something they have to respond to after they read to make them more accountable. But I would not suggest doing that all the time, because that kind of takes away from just reading. You want kids to just read for practice, read for enjoyment. It's that reading time that our kids need. They need it all through the day, actually, through all areas. And so that's why it's so important to give kids that self-selected time to read. And you also want the kids to be reading books that are fit for them, a good level, not too difficult, because then kids will start rolling on the floor and they'll become disengaged. So finding good fit books that they're able to read during that time. Back in the room, and so she's in the back of the room if you want to wave. So because these pictures come from her classroom, and I'm going to speak for her, but if you want to chime in, please do. And so they made this anchor chart, and the kids talked about what good things readers do. So there's all kinds of ideas they came up with. I can read to myself. I read all the time. the words. I can reread the story to my sister. So just, it's really their point of view on what good things readers do when they're reading. And so thinking about that as they're reading to themselves. So writing is another rotation. So during this rotation, students should have extended time to practice and the freedom to explore different writing topics. Choose what to write about. They can underline words they don't know how to spell and move on. You don't want them sitting getting stuck on a word. It's important that maybe they understand they don't understand how to write the word, but you want them to move on. You want them to be able to become independent in the center. It's not about getting up and running to the teacher all the time during the writing station. So you really want to think about what you're going to have the kids do and come up with a plan. If kids have questions on what they're writing about or how to spell something, what are some ways to alleviate the traffic in the classroom? And you want to keep it exciting. And so in this station, this was really neat. Christine has a student of the week, and all of the students write, it's like a letter to the students.
Each child writes one page when everyone's done together in a book. But the star of the week gets to write on a board all of their favorites. They say one different share. So like favorite food, favorite things they like to do with their family, and then the kids get to pick from that board. And then we put the book together, and then they can the book that Friday.
So on this particular day, her writing station, this is what the kids were doing. But you've, of course, explained this thoroughly. They've practiced this. So when I was in the classroom, I mean, they went right to that station. She talked briefly at the beginning and in our breakout, you'll see how she introduced the stations if we have time. But they just knew right what to do. They got their writing utensils out. That group went to the writing station and they just started writing about that student. So I'll show you a little video clip. Says, you are smart. You are my best friend. That's nice. And so there's her list of ideas about Silas, is who they were writing to that day. And then I like how you keep your journals all in one area. She has all her reading response journals there ready to go if that's what they're doing during their writing as well. So it's kind of like all her writing stuff is in that one area. This is just another anchor chart for writing. We are amazing writers. What do good writers do? And so I use punctuation. I use spaces in my writing. Maybe we're complimenting to each other. I love your story. Anything else you wanted to add about that?
I put that up every day, writing, so they know the book that I want to see and refer back to it. Just kind of gives them a guide, and it's made by them, so it's more meaningful.
Read to someone is another one of the daily 5 stations. This provides a meaningful time for developing readers to increase their comprehension, fluency, and accuracy, and really how to become a good reading partner. A time where they can check for understanding and ask each other questions. They talk a lot about this eek throughout the book, and I see it a lot in classrooms. So it's all about how do we sit the right way when we're reading with the partner. So it might be elbow to elbow, knee to knee. So really reinforcing that, and Christine has that on an anchor chart in her room. She has these baskets with the books all ready to go that they can read to somebody. Do they know which which bag to get?
You know, in there, I have every level, and it's more choice, and I switch them out too.
And this really takes a lot of modeling too, because even for fourth graders, you can say, okay, you're going to go read with a partner. And if you don't model and really discuss how we can appropriately sit with each other and read a book, you know, sometimes kids don't really, they'll last a few minutes, but they can become off task. So how can you really model and keep that management system in place for how they can sit and read a book with a partner? These are just some of her posters. Reading to someone, what does it look like? So she's got some ideas here. Stay in one spot, using inside voices, making sure we are reading the entire time, building stamina. I do a lot of coaching in classrooms, and I see the Daily 5 is going on in a lot of the classrooms in the schools that I visit. And I will say, you know, right away during Daily 5, if the teacher took a lot of time in setting up that management system. In Christine's room, I've been in her room numerous times, and the kids know exactly what they're supposed to do. You don't see a lot of fiddle faddle and the kids laying on the floor messing around. You do see that sometimes in classrooms. If you know, it's really important. If that starts happening, we have to stop. We have to reiterate it again and really talk about how we're supposed to act during this Daily 5 rotation and how is it most meaningful. We want it to be a good use of time. Listening to reading. For emerging readers, time spent listening to fluent reading models is invaluable to building reading punctuation and expression. If you go back to that framework that I gave you at the very beginning, just go back to that. It's that first page with all those little pieces of the framework. At the very top, what does it say in that bubble? Interactive read aloud. Even for intermediate kids, that read aloud and modeling comprehension, fluency, how do we act when we get to different types of punctuation? That read aloud is so important. And I feel like when I started teaching, it was such a big deal to use my big book, and it was all about shared reading and interactive read alouds. And sometimes I feel like we've kind of gotten away from that a little bit. I don't know where you're all at with it, but it's really important that our kids have good models for reading. Struggling readers also find this rotation beneficial as it allows them to access texts that meet their listening comprehension level, even if that exceeds their reading level. This is a nice time. They can use some sort of listening device, audiobooks. It was interesting in lots of the material I read, nobody said tapes and books. And probably a lot of you are laughing too, but that's what I always used is tapes, and you don't see tapes. Really, well, CDs. You don't even see CDs as much anymore, but that's what I always used to use. And so this might be a time where you have a technology rollout. Maybe you have a program you're using in your school, but really during the reading rotations, you want it to be connected to literacy. This is not a time where kids are playing math games and those types of things. You want it all to be connected to your strategies and skills that you're teaching at your grade level. So perhaps they're on the computer doing some type of program. That can be during the listening station as well. Word work is another one of the Daily 5 rotations. This is a time where you can focus on spelling and vocab by creating a print-rich environment and offering manipulatives for students to experiment and develop an interest for language. You can connect these with your word work and phonics lessons that you teach in your whole group. It's a nice time for primary kids. You see more use of letter sorts, word sorts, magnetic letters. You don't see as much with a word workstation when you get into the intermediate grades. Word work should be implemented into your guided reading lesson, but you see more of the word work at the primary grades as an actual station. We'll show a little video clip here of word work. This is something else Christine has, is she has everything labeled, and then she has what they are to do in that basket. So the top of those baskets that I showed you is the station and what the directions are. And so here's her word workstation, and there she is back there conducting her reading group. within the class. And the kids were writing sentences with their words here. Yes. She had little cards with pictures and words, and they were writing sentences. I'm going to keep going because of time. I want to show you her signal too for movement. Even though I know we need to move, hopefully. Oh, is it not going to come through? Oh, maybe I don't have it on here. Anyway, this, she has this tambourine, and she has one of the students hit the tambourine, and all the kids get up and they move to their next station. So her group goes to their next station, and then the other kids keep moving. So having that signal for when to rotate and what the kids are supposed to do, that's another part of that management piece. For older students, as intermediate teachers, the sisters, is what they call the authors of the Daily Five, carry out a 45 to 60-minute reading session with the integration of science and social studies. That meaning expository text is integrated into the stations. We're not teaching science and social studies. It's not about teaching those topics, but integrating books and content connected to more content area. Reading to self, read to someone, and working on writing become the foundation of the Daily Five in intermediate grades. Older students can start with a longer practice, but remember, even older students need to work on stamina. You can establish choice reading and use of a reader's notebook. I really like these. They have to be purchased, but you can just use, notebooks that you buy. But having some type of interactive notebook, I see this more in Daily Five with the intermediate grades, where students are using the notebook to respond to their books. So maybe they're working on a certain genre, or they're writing a response, or connecting to discussion that they've had, some collaborative conversation with their groups, and they can be responding in a reader's notebook. So once again, for intermediate grades, it's important that you can link what you're doing to other parts of your class, and engaging students, once again, in social interaction and having conversations about what they're reading. The activities are structured so that learners are able to offer a range of acceptable responses, and students express their thinking rather than answering a set of prepared questions. So it's really getting kids in their groups to have conversations about their reading and about what they're doing, because intermediate kids can handle that. They're able to do that, and that's something kids can do independently while you are working with your group. I know you can't see this, but as I told you before, we have established an outline for the first 20 days of getting the Daily Five going in your classroom. And we have all of that completed for grades kinder. There's one just for kinder, and then grades 1st through 6th grade. So if that's something you might be interested in at your school, I can share that with Donna, and maybe she can distribute that to you electronically. It's really long, so I didn't get it copied for today, but if it's something you might be interested in, let us know. For example, this is just launching word work, and it goes through your whole group, your shared practice, and then the materials that you would need for your word work, and that's day 1. So this is for grade 1, 2 is one of the clusters. So, okay. So I just kind of gave you an overview of the Daily Five, and we're going to break out into our 3 sessions.
You showed.
That's okay.
I didn't
We're
know. I
gonna
was like,
go in,
oh,
we're gonna
okay.
go in detail with
Okay.
it now. Yeah.
Okay, they couldn't hook the computer up in the other room, so I hope this one. Is this your
Yep,
computer?
and it's
Okay,
working.
good.
I did
Because
it on
they
mine.
couldn't. Okay, well I have it on my own too.
Okay.
They couldn't hook it up, and I was like, it's not the same as we have.
Just use mine because it's downloaded.
That's fine.
Okay,
That's
let's
even
do that.
better.
And then,
Yeah.
uh,
But I do want to. I'm going to tell them that I'm going to use like back and forth a little bit, just because. Yeah. Yep. Oh yes, that's funny. I never know.
I would turn the light on too. It's really hard.
I brought my kids' journals
I
just to
don't know
show
if they want to set you up with this. They're recording
Okay.
this, so I don't know if you want to put this on.
Okay. Should I? Did you have it on? Okay. Because I can hear you loud and clear. So.
But it's for
Okay.
yeah. So if you want to put that, I don't know.
All right, stick it in my. It's good that I wore that. Like, what do I do? What do I do with this? I'm such a, that kindergarten background. Teachers want to see pictures. They want real things. Okay. Is this on? How can we tell? Okay. Okay. The light is on. It's red though. Oh wait, maybe I'll hit power.
We're going to go ahead and continue on. So Christine is with us. She's been with us. I've been highlighting some of what she does in her classroom. If you're a second grade teacher, thumb up. Second grade. Where's the third grade? And fourth grade. Okay, great. So glad you're here. And Christine teaches at Rose Hill Elementary, and I'll let her talk more about herself and how long she's taught, and then go to the Daily Five.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. My name's Christine Coltis. I've been with OPS for 11 years. I've been teaching for 15. I taught 4 years in Pensacola, Florida, where I'm from. We've moved all over. My husband's Air Force. I've been with OPS for 11 years and Rose Hill, 2 years at Rose Hill and 9 years at Wakanda. And I taught kindergarten for 9 years. So this is my second year in second grade. Love it. Loved the Daily Five in kindergarten, which we did, and kind of had to tweak a lot that I read about in Daily Five from the sisters to make it fit kindergarten, and it just worked. So mine is a little bit different. I actually just took a lot of pictures because I figured that kindergarten teacher in me classroom and see what it looks like. So my PowerPoint is basically just pictures from my classroom that I'm going to go through and show you what we do at each rotation, what the kids do, and things like that. Just before I start this, just to let you know, the first 45 minutes before we even start Daily Five, we've had our whole group reading. So my students know the book, we've dived into it, we've read it, they know the vocabulary. This is reinforcing all of those things. This is the table that I'm at, and my students all sit at tables. I call it like a Kagan school. My students are used to working in groups. We're not in rows or things like that. Everybody's at a group. For Daily Five, they're in their guided reading level group, but they're used to sitting in tables. So I use those same tables for my rotations. So just picture in your head 5 tables around the outside of the classroom, and then I have 1 in the center. And those 5 on the outside of the classrooms, those are my Daily Five rotations. This is mine in the back. My students come sit here. I have this little whiteboard where I have their goal on the card. Basically, they have a Ziploc, very similar to this. This is the Read to Someone that Carrie showed you. A Ziploc with their 5 books in it that they've had from the week, and then we switch those out. So go to the next one so I can show. This is behind that table where I have each of my baskets with my 5 groups, and I have the books already in there ready to go. I've gotten them the week before. I have the vocabulary words in there, and I just really stick them in there. Some of them you can see the little white, just on index cards. And then that's what I show on my whiteboard, the vocabulary words before we even dive in. So this is just behind that table that you just saw, just a little way to keep it organized. Also, if I'm not there and there's a sub, they know right away which reading group, which bag to use. So, okay. Oh, this is just showing you my whiteboard where I have my goal. My students know their goal, and then we spend a lot of time on vocabulary. So I always have the vocabulary words. This is magnetic. I just stick them right on there. Write them with a marker, good to go. They're in the Ziplocs. So that does take a little bit of time, but then a lot of those books, some of them are mine, some of them are from the book room. You just pull it out and use it for the next group or the next level, just depending what book it is. Okay, so this is just to show you a little bit of how my students rotate. This is my first group, and then they are going to be moving to technology, which is right here. I didn't really zone in on technology because that's different in everybody's classroom. We do Imagine Learning, so like Carrie said, that should be reading. My students are doing that program for 20 minutes. We're at our rotations, and so far we've had my group, technology. Okay, this is just to show you the next table that they go to. I purchased these little containers, and this is my writing table where the students have everything they need right there when they go to it. So in the top drawer, they have their journals, crayons, anything they need here. And then the bottom one is their Ziploc, because I want them to keep their books with them at their table. We have 5 minutes before PE or a few minutes before something starts, they grab those Ziplocs, and then they can reread those books from the guided reading table that they meet me at. Okay, this is right next to that table. So here are their journals. I have everything labeled, so each group knows where their journal is. They're not digging through anything. They get their journal, and then the table's right here. So they have their journal. They have all their materials in that little in the little drawers. And it's literally 2 steps away, right there. Names are on it, so they know exactly where to put it back. Okay. We might have to go back and forth, too. It's kind of hard to get like a rotating picture of everything. This is the next table they go to, and this is word work. Again, I have the tub ready to go. I actually brought one of the bins just to show you, and I brought word work. This is the one, for me, takes a little bit of time. Now that I've been doing it for a while, materials, I don't put copies or dittos in them. They're boring. And if the kids are going to be there for 20 minutes, it's like Carrie said, everything's manipulative thing that they use. So I just grabbed one activity. This is something that they would do at word work, just to show you an activity. Everything has a purpose. The little gray bin has what's their purpose. So the students know what they're supposed to do when they get there. And I do read these to them right before we start, so they know, but it's also so that they can go back and refer to it. This would be an activity where they had pictures, and on the back they would have to put the words in ABC order, and then it would say pick 5 to use in a sentence. And then they would have pencils, everything's right here, highlighters to underline the word. For this table, I purposely have it right here, so there's all this carpet space. So this group can go down on the carpet. I forget the picture that Carrie had, but we do use magnets with like baking trays. So this table I feel like needs a little bit more room. So they're allowed to come down on the carpet and work it as a group. When they do the ABC order cards, I see them on the ground, moving them around. So you want to give them a little bit of extra space for word work. We use magnets a lot at this table, and we also do our vocabulary notebooks for 2 days. 2 days of every week is a vocabulary notebook. I got the folders 10 cents a piece in July. They do have, we can pass them around, they're really cute. We get the copies made, and then I make them over the summer. This in their journeys, that's our reading curriculum. So they know we do 4 words on Monday, 4 words on Tuesday, so they can take their time. They also have their choice. It's in our book that they have, their journeys book. So they can either copy the sentence that's in there for your strugglers, or make up their own one and then make a picture, show a connection. So this is 2 days of word work right there, because word work is something that, for me, I spend a little bit of money on it, but now that I have it, here's another manipulative, when we did compound words, so the students would have to put the compound words together and then pick 5 to use in a sentence. There's like 12 in here, so again, they have that choice. But everything is in the bin, labeled with word work, the directions and I promise you they're not all typed, but some of them are. I have the directions right here, and then I just tape it right in there. I do read it to them, but they can still go back and look over it. So that's just to show you my word work table. Forget which one's next. Oh, that's the kids at the table. And this is actually them using their Journeys book, and there's the vocabulary notebooks. Everything's there. Also, I do give them the choice if they want to go to the table, book, get their reading book and pencils or crowns, they can go find a cozy spot in the room. And we call it a cozy spot. So they don't have to stay at the tables. It just depends on the group. My kids this year, most of them do stay, but they do have that option where they can get their materials and go find a spot in the room. Something like where they're doing the ABC order, they can put the words in order on the floor, and then they can go else. We have like those same baking trays they can also use to write on the floor. And then they just put the cards back. So everything's in the bin. You know, the vocabulary notebooks, I love doing that. It's something that OPS, it was a requirement for a while. I'm not sure if it still is, but we worked so hard on vocabulary. So they really love their notebooks. And also just to let you know about accountability with the vocabulary notebooks and with anything that they're doing. On Friday, we have like vocab check or journal check, and they never know what I'm going to ask them to share with someone. We do a lot of mix pair share and think pair share, where they have to share their work and then they have to explain it. So they never know when I'm going to tell them like, okay, guys, we're checking vocabulary books this week, and then they'll get them out and we'll have to share them. So that's kind of a way to be accountable. I do check them, but now that a couple of them have like even said like, oh, I got busted, you know, because they got caught with their work not done, that usually does not happen very much because they know that we're going to share it. They know that I'm going to check it. It's just not something that I check and write and all that. There's just not time. But they do know that I'm going to look at it. And this is just to show you my bin. This is read to someone, so this is the next one. Labeled directions, what to do. I do always put a writing activity in there, but they don't always get to it, number one, and they don't always have to do it. I can usually tell, and I'll ask them, did you reread it? If they did, then they're ready to write. It depends on the student, it depends on the group, but I do usually put something for them to do with the book. And again, sometimes they can stay at that table, they can get the book and go somewhere else if they want to. And that's like that's one of our cozy spots in the classroom. He just moved the iPad from the technology table and went over there. But I tell them that, you know, they have a choice. They don't have to stay at the table. It's up to them. This is something I feel like when Daily 5 starts to run, I kind of think of it like as a well-oiled machine. I feel like mine runs pretty well. This is my table back here. And I have a problem-solving light. And when the light is on, they have to solve their own problems because I'm reading with my students. So I don't want them back there. I want them, if it's something that they can do, and I usually tell them, unless you're bleeding or throwing up, you can solve it yourself. So I don't want them to interrupt the group. And now that, you know, we're in mid-January, they'll walk over and I'll just kind of point to the light and they'll be like, oh, sorry, it's not that important. And they'll just turn around. So this is probably something I would wait until you have Daily 5 running and you know that everybody knows what's expected of you, that there really should not be any questions. But I do like my lamp. So.
And there's, like I was watching her a child would come up to her group and talk to it, and she's reading the light.
Yes. So, and this is definitely something you want to make sure that you know there's no questions. Everything is in the bin. All the materials are there. They don't need anything. So that's just kind of something fun I wanted to share with you. I think was there one about my first group? Go back, or I just wanted to show you one, I think it was either the first or second one. Okay. Oh, I don't know if okay, go to this one. There's a reason why I have my highest level group at my table, because sometimes I have to get up. And as you can see, my chair is empty. I'm usually just making sure that everybody's on task. Everybody knows what to do. Sometimes I even go up to them and I'm like, what are you guys doing at this table? And I'll ask them these words in ABC order and then pick 5. So I'm checking to make sure that they know what what my expectations are. My group, this group doesn't need me there all the time. They know, get in their chapter book, dive in. They have their Ziploc with them. They know to put it under their chair. They know to start. And I've already got the goal up on the board. So I'm not always sitting there for the first 2 minutes of Daily 5. I'm making sure that everybody knows what to do. And usually by then we're fine. So I just make sure that first group, everybody knows where they're at. They know how to do it.
How many students do you have this
I
year?
have 25 students. I have an ESL para that comes in my room for 30 minutes, and it is sometimes during guided reading. And he works with my ESL friends, but my ELL friends, but no. Yeah, this is something where the first 2 weeks of school, and usually we start like on a Wednesday, that Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, we work a lot on rotations, especially since my students are going, moving like a clock, and we say moving like a clock. Sometimes I will put out like blocks or something fun at a table. The first week of school, it's not about the content. It's about getting ready for that. What comes next and what table are you going to next? Where are the materials? Where's your journal? Where are your Ziplocs? I work on that so much the first 2 weeks. I mean, in fact, I remember last year my principal walked in and she was like, what are they doing? You know, because I had Play-Doh at one table and I had blocks at another table and I had magnets at another table. And I said, we're working on rotations and we're working on routines and we're working on procedures. And she came in 3 weeks later and she was like, oh my goodness. So that first week, and I'd take a full week getting the kids used to where everything needs to be put back. Your group, where are your things? Where are your materials? Which way are we going? You know, things like that, because we move like a clock. So I work a lot on that in the beginning of the year, but it pays off. I teach second. So, yeah.
So you have 45 minutes whole group.
We have 45 minutes whole group before this, correct?
Okay, and then
This is an hour and a half.
an hour.
Yes. So my groups are 20 minutes each. If I do have to shorten it because that whole group reading took a little bit of time, I take it from my highest group, but I really don't have to. I feel like
Now,
It's
third
20
and
minutes.
fourth grade in our district is less time. So it would not be as much time. I think it's like 20, 25 minutes less than this. I have to look at our time frame. But we are working on that. Does that include your intervention half hour?
that's right after this. You mean
So that does
LLI?
not include
No,
that.
my LLI is right after this. It's 3:30. And this doesn't, you know, writing is a whole nother curriculum. They're just writing about the stories. So when they're at that writing table, that's strictly just about, we have journeys in second grade. It's called journeys, and that's what we have. So
Do they carry the Ziplocs around?
well, they only carry the Ziploc to this table, unless they need it. Now they don't need it for writing and they don't need it for word work. But if sometimes they don't carry them around. They stay in the three drawers. They stay in the bottom of that and they stay at their table. So wherever the child sits, if she's sitting at this table, then it's in that third drawer at her table because she can get it anytime. But no, they only get it for my table. Then they go and put it back. Then they go to technology. Then they go to then they go to writing. Then they go to word work, and then they go to read to someone or read to self. But if they finish early, that's the first, if they finish something early, that's what I want them to go get your Ziploc and reread the book that I gave you here. So they don't carry them around. They stay in those tubs, but they can go back and use them anytime. We do 5 books. There's only 5 books in everyone's Ziploc. And it just depends on your group. Like my highest group, they're doing a chapter book, so they're not getting all those books. My 3 out of my 4 groups, we're doing a new book every day. My first 2, they're doing a chapter book, so it's usually a chapter book every week. My second group, they might get 2 books a week, 3 books a week, it just depends. But I also have a library up here, and then I have a whole basket of these that they can always go to. So, but yes, the guided reading books, those are the books that I give them, and they don't carry them around to each rotation, but they have them at their table. Completely different book. Completely different book. I have a huge basket of these. I think that was in one of yours. I have every genre. I mean, I have all kinds of neat books for them to pick for that. Well, some of them I did. I do, you know, I'll go to that half-price bookstore. The thing about Read to Someone and Read to Self is you need 2 books. So anytime I see 2 books, I'm usually buying 2 books. I'm going to be honest. I've been a teacher for so long. I do buy them in the Scholastic orders. I don't know if you guys do that, and I use those points, and I'll buy 2 of everything, 2 of the books that I want, because that basket is huge because I want them to have a variety there. The Read to Someone, I use these, but I also use our book room. I don't know if you guys have a book room. So I also use that too. Do you guys have a book room? So
No.
okay.
Somewhere in the process,
Okay.
and yeah.
Okay. But I do buy a lot of my books. Yes.
Now, read to self, if they're doing that, would they use those books from their book bag from guided reading, or what would they use if they were doing?
It depends. I switch it up. There are times, I think my picture had all the same book in there, the Nest book. It depends. What did we do today? Today we did a magazine. So I had those National Geographic magazines, which I only bought half of those for this year, and my kids have to share. So I do put 6 in the bin to make sure they have it, but I switch it up. Sometimes I put a variety of these. I have between 5 and 6 kids at each rotation. So I'll put 10 of these in a basket at that table. So there's a variety. Sometimes I do put the book from my book room in there, and I'll put like 2 different books. So I switch it up. But yeah, I'm using our book room a lot, but I do buy some things.
So like, I'm thinking like for intermediate, like 4th grade, you may have more kids on that being more novels, chapter books. That could be something in
Mhm.
lieu of, and they're responding more. You know, it can look different depending on the levels of your kids and what's going to be most meaningful and keep them engaged. Just like her reading notebooks, the read to self could be that with an extension with the reading notebook. So it kind of depends on, you know, like she's got a variety of levels all across the board,
Yep.
at emergent
D.
levels all the way to novels.
Mhm.
And so kids that are reading at a level D in guided reading should have a new book every day or every 2 days. Because kids at that level need lots of exposure to books, lots of reading practice. They're still learning to read. And so it kind of just depends on the makeup of your kids, where they're at. Kids that are reading more at those higher levels may not need so many different mix-up of books in their bag for read to self or whatever it might be.
And I have level D to P in my classroom. So I put a variety, and my Ps, they work so hard. I mean, they are chapter books, writing about mysteries. You know, sometimes it's not a bad thing to let them pick a Shopkins book. They're still learning, they're still reading. But I do have other books in there where I know I do spend a lot of money, but it's not all the time. Once you have it, you have it. Once you go over those rules and procedures about how to take care of things, they last. I mean, yeah, I went to Lakeshore and got this, make sure I had a 20% coupon, but I've had it now for a couple years, and they know to put it back. We use it all the time for compound words. So, you know, I can borrow things. I have another 2nd grade teacher. We swap things out. I do make a lot of the word work cards too, but once you make them and have them, then you have them. So I know the materials, especially that's why I brought some things for word work, because I feel like that takes a little bit of work. Journeys, or what program? Yes, we have. No, like you mean the Basil? Oh.
Are you referring to level reading? And so when we talk about level reading and book rooms, it can really be purchased from anywhere as long as the books are level. In our district, a long time ago, and I'll say like working with the ESL department, my supervisor decided to put a lot of funding into book rooms because our kids cannot read basic level material. And so it was all about, that's where kind of we targeted our things. We started book rooms. And so back then it was Rigby, if you've heard of Rigby level readers, lots of just different companies were coming out with book rooms, level readers. And so I know now Scholastic and some of the companies, you can buy a whole set of a book room. And so maybe is that what you're referring to? Yeah, were you expected just to buy them?
No, we do have them, and that's what this is. They're doing a level. They're on level. This is my level P group, and I do get these books from the book room because we put the vocabulary cards in there. We all add things that each teacher uses them for. So yes, these are leveled, and they are in my book room. I'm kind of talking more about for the read to someone or read to self station. That's pretty much what those are things what I pick. App. Mm-hmm. Yes. It's Book Wizard. The app is Book Wizard. Yeah.
Scholastic's really good, as well as that's why book going. This is what I'm looking for. If you have the time to be on the phone with us, they'll help you level it. And like it's 4th grade, and I'll go into the basement sometimes, and like we just read about Martin Luther King, and now I went and ordered, and again, putting some of my money in it because Scholastic didn't have the ones I want, on Rosa Parks and Harriet Tubman and some others. And we have like a little book group, so we kind of read, study. But one of the things my previous school did is any book that was a school book that you all went into the book to get the book room started. If my fourth grader was reading that book and they were using it in fifth grade again, because it wasn't the same kids reading it, because it was the lower kids in fifth grade reading that fourth grade book, that was my top grader in fourth grade.
Mhm.
And so we started that way and then built upon it.
Exactly.
It was the school that had, for the book room, had to put the investment in.
I love our book room. I don't know if all schools have that, but my school is, I mean, I have almost half of my students are ELL students. So, but I use BookWizard because that app, you can scan it. And if the scan doesn't show up, you can just type it in and it will show up. So that's the only one that I have on my phone. Sure. Yes.
So a lot of the teachers that I work with, they don't have 2.5,
Mhm.
2 hours of uninterrupted time.
That is my block.
Completely uninterrupted.
Yes.
Specials.
My specials are in the morning. We have a 50-minute special in the morning. And I purposely do guided reading at the opposite time of the day. So in the morning, we have writing for an hour, my special, and then math, lunch, recess, all that fun stuff. And then this is my afternoon. It's 45 minutes, whole group instruction, and that's our basal program journeys. It's an hour and a half of this. Minutes after this that I do, it's called LLI that we do. But
So some teachers, though, your schedule does not always work out.
Yes.
perfect like that.
Yes.
And so there will be teachers that will do half their guided lessons, like they'll break it up. So
Mhm.
they'll do daily 5 for half hour, 25 minutes. I'll get 2-3 groups in, go to specials, come back.
yes.
So it is playing with it. What works best for your situation. Yeah, question in the back. Can you give me 5, please? I know this is a lot of hot topic here, but we only have about 10 minutes left. Your question? Thanks.
And I know this is a age-old question. You have the guided read group and the chapter books.
Yes.
How do you keep morale up with kids that are going to kind of that are not reading as well as the other children?
You know, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't have a problem with that. They all have their own Ziploc with books in it. I do have some groups that'll be like, when do we get a chapter book? And there are just no chapter books in their level, but they're so engaged with the books and they all have a Ziploc. They all have the books in there. I don't have kids that are like, well, when am I going to be on that level? Or he's on that level. I don't have that. So I don't think I have an answer for that because I don't see that with my kiddos. I didn't last year either. They all have what they need. And I tell them that too. You have what you need, so I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't really have an answer for that because I don't feel like I feel like they all have something that they're excited about in their Ziploc.
Or does anyone have like that experience?
Yeah.
Or have recommendations for
Well, and I know in theory it sounds good, but when you've got parents from
Yeah.
that say, well, so-and-so's reading this.
You know what? I usually tell the parent we read every day. I benchmark them. I know exactly what level they're on, and we have to work towards that. We're just not there. But yeah, yes. Yes, exactly. Yes. My groups switch. My groups do switch. Usually, in fact, that's why that first 5 days, they're just working at their same table group when they rotate because I haven't gotten them in levels yet. We benchmark all of our kiddos in the beginning of the school year. And then we get groups and I tell them, you might switch. We have to see how this works out because then I'll have some kids that all of a sudden take off and they're not anywhere near their level from first grade because there was so much growth over the summer. It just depends, but we do a little bit of moving around in the beginning of the year. I feel like now all of my groups are really solid. We're good, but my kids will move around. I don't know if you took a picture of that board that says Daily 5 that the big one that has their names. Did you show that? Okay, so the one that Carrie showed where I had the 5 tables and then their names are printed real large on it, I just move their names. And as long as they know where they're starting, if I move a kiddo, this is where you start. It's the same, we rotate the same way. So moving kids in groups is really easy.
And really that's the goal, like in guided reading, is you don't want your groups to become stagnant.
Mhm.
It's all about flex grouping, like you want your kids to move on, to move forward. And so, you know, you don't want your group of Ds to stay Ds for 4 months.
Right.
You're hoping some kids are gonna move on, or your Ms to all stay. You're not gonna have a perfect group of 5 Ms. And we'll really get into this when we move into guided reading, but thinking about that, the daily 5 really helps to cater to that. Because then you can move kids in and out, they go to a different group. You know, and since we're talking about that, you're not always gonna have a perfect group of 5
Mm-mm.
Ms, 5 S's, right? And so you have to think about how you're gonna group your kids. And we'll get into that as we move through the training, but the management system, having that in place really helps you to guide those flex groups as well. Yeah.
Do they have like, their choice of books, is that based on their reading level, or they all have the same choice?
For that, it's not, because they've already been to my table. They've already written. They've already had so many structured things. For that, it's not. This is in my classroom. It's more of a choice. You know, if they've been reading about, we've done a whole thing on Jackie Robinson this week. So if they've been reading about Jackie Robinson and they've written about him and they've done an activity with them, you know, it's okay to let them read Shopkins at Read to Self. It is choice. And I have a lot of variety there. And many times it's not just one book. They're doing more than, you know, some of them will do 2 and 3 books, and I see them, they'll help a friend. You know, we go over things that I want them to be doing at Read to Self or Read to Someone. But for my group, it's more of a choice. That could probably just be whatever works for your kids. Oh, and I also just wanted to show, just since we were talking about materials, this is just an activity for word work that I made. It's just pictures that I found, typed up the name of the animal. So they have to, and we do this with an animal book. And then they have to match the animal. And then there's like 12 here. They have to write a sentence for 5 of them, 6 of them. So some of my word work things I really do try to make. But I'm like that one teacher, I do spend a little bit of money.
Are you good with them watching
Oh.
your directions?
Oh, sure.
That we gave?
I haven't seen this. Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to say, do you want to give them the?
This is when we've already finished the video clip that you're going to watch. We've already finished our 45 minutes of whole group, and this is right before Daily 5 starts. So I go over what's in our bins. I actually move to each table and explain. There you can see a gray bin right there. And then we have a little word. Our word is Zoom, so nobody moves until Zoom. So they wait until I'm done directions.
All right, we know that nouns are people.
That's okay.
Emily, please. Shoes. Clock. Pumpkin. Mouse. Orange. House. Flower. Umbrella. Shoes. Net. Telephone. Where? Boys and girls, there are more than 10 in here, but I need 10 detailed sentences. What are we doing with these? We are underlining our words so that our eyes go right to it. All right. All right, boys and girls, at our reading table. Boys and girls, today you need to put together an anchor chart, and I know that you've done this before, so you can do it. Who's it? Ready to go. I'm thinking, okay, you're definitely taking notes. Boys and girls, I'm thinking that since this is up and we've made it like this, put the glue on the back of the paper and then put it up, because I don't want you to rip through the cabinet, okay? All right, our story this week, who can remember what our story is? Great. Mr. Cannon has some time trouble. So boys and girls, you are going to need to dig back into the text. First of all, you are going to need to find the part that you, or reread it, find parts that you want to reread again. We read it all week. I know this story. Because our anchor chart today is about summarizing. We are going to summarize the story in your own words. Back and say, what was our story about? And give me Boys and girls, you're using your book. Your cards are here. Remember, since we're gluing them on an anchor chart, you can only write on the front side. That's not an eye on me, so you know what to do. All right? You can only write on one side because remember, you're going to take it on. I have markers, crayons, glue sticks. Boys and girls, the markers are to outline things. All right? Because we want to be able to read this then when we're done rotation and look at everyone's summary. Everything is here at the table, ready to go. This table can be pulled out.
So they sit there, but they put their books in the center. Everyone else rotates.
My table's ready to go. You know what to do. Bring your zip box. Get started right away. We can go. What are we doing on the computer? Imagine learning. Touch a break. Do we know our code? I think we know it. All right. Go ahead. Let's take a look. Go ahead. 1 through 10. All right.
So, oh, okay. Yes. When Carrie was here, it was a Friday, and Friday we made that Star of the Week book when she came in that one time. So that's the writing that they're doing. That's not part of Daily 5, but that is meaningful writing. And then anchor chart, I usually do that in a whole group, but we hadn't gotten to it. So they actually didn't do read to self or read to someone that day. They made the anchor chart. They are still diving into a book. They're still reading. They're still helping their friends. And the center table that they're at right there, this is the center table. You saw how the students are rotating like this. If students go to a table, not my table or not technology because they wouldn't need to, but let's say they want to finish something in their journal, they can go to the center table to finish and then move on. So I have that space where they don't have to just give up or stop working. They can go to the center table and finish and then go to their table. Sometimes they do it, sometimes they don't. It just depends what we're working on. But I have that space for them so they know that they can go finish their thoughts. That's it. Any more questions? Thank you.
So we really appreciate your time today, and I can't thank her enough for letting me come in and just videotape her interaction with her kids. Well, I will see if I could get those lessons sent with how to create anchor charts for Daily 5. It really walks you through how to do that. Our next steps to training will be benchmarking and then getting really into the nitty-gritty of the guided lesson. I don't even know if we've set the dates for that yet. I don't think we have. So we'll let you know. All right, so have a great night. Thank you. It's fun.
Hey. Your vocabulary.
Oh, sure.
How to do my vocabulary.
This is, I feel like every year I tweak these too, but we made these up since we have 8 words a
like
week.
that.
We have 8 words a week, so this is 1 week.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I probably do.
Well, I could
Let me unhook it.
thank you.
Yes,
I love
we
that.
have to get copies too, so I was trying to
I
get.
have all mine in my vocabulary for
Yeah.
every story, and then I just have envelopes that they can, read.
Right.
But I like the idea of writing it down.
Yes, and
And then keeping it so they can
Yes.
go back and see
I
it.
love the book.
That's what I don't.
And also what I like too is sometimes when they finish there, and I'll say, check your words from last week. Did you put in as much effort? Everything's right here. They don't need to go searching for anything.
Right. I
They
like
can
that
go
a
back.
lot.
And I also like to see the growth.
Yeah,
I'm going
and
to
their
give a
sentence
short
writing
speech.
and their. Now they can they?
Well, some of my kids, they do have to copy what's in the book. I know you're not supposed to do that, but it goes
Well, I
away.
have the
But-
flashcards, but you can still say put them in your own words.
Yes, and they
And
do.
some will have to
Yes.
use it.
They can use a sentence, use it in their own sentence, like I'm going to give a short speech, like that,
Uh-huh.
Safety tip number 101.
Yeah.
So, yes, I have probably just one group that does use the book and kind of write the book, but I'm still trying to kind of wean them, like, but yeah, I don't encourage them to write what's in the book, but I have
Because if
some
you want
students
my
that do,
presentation.
And the other thing I was going to ask, when you have them in your groups, they're all
I'll
working
have to
on the
take
same
videos
thing.
out because of
each group is, yes.
Yeah.
they're in their guided reading group, so they're
And I
all
think
kind of
that's what I don't do the daily five, but I have like centers, and I've got the bins with all the directions and the cards and stuff.
Yeah.
And I've had classes where, you know, I just move, you know, you have choice of two or three, that you pick the one center you want. I'm beginning to think maybe I need to say, okay, we're all working
where
on
you're
this.
at, right,
with
right.
this. So I was
This
just
just works for
wondering,
me, and they do know to go to the next one, and they are.
Did you send me
otherwise I
those to
give
me,
you
like
too many
this one?
choices and you don't know. And some of those cards, my
Might be PDF, is that all right?
center.
I think so, yeah.
It's all the information.
I put the question that they're, I put the question on there.
Give them, pick
yeah.
pick the skill for them, and I think that's what
Yeah,
I like.
and I also like it too, just because I know, I don't have a lot of that time where they're looking like, let me go do this, they're at their table, they're ready to go, they're not wasting time. You know, and I'll tell them, I'm like, I feel like you guys could bring it together, let's go, bring it together, because everything's right there. They're not having to go look for a pencil, they're not having to go look for their book, they're not having to
Or
look for
going to
comprehension
the, like
question.
right now, mine are like deciding, do I want to do that one?
Yeah.
No, I'm gonna do this one,
Right.
you know, yeah, good idea.
I think like 2 choices is probably my max when I
That
have
would
it.
be
And even for vocabulary, I did bring a vocabulary card, like they can use it in their own sentence, or they can write something from the card. You pick. I have more than 2 choices, they're gonna waste a lot of time going,
Yeah.
what should it be?
Yeah.
I think this is just for me.
Well, thank
Yeah,
you.
sure.
How many times you guys benchmark?
We benchmark in the beginning of the year and at the end of the year.
Okay.
And then we do running records. I do running records every day with my kids, 1 kid per group.
So when you're doing a running record?
Right when that group gets there, my running record is like even before, because they immediately get their book out from yesterday.
Mhm.
That's the book that I do my running record on, and I do 1 person, 1 day. So I'm doing, everybody gets done in a
So when they
week.
get to a certain level,
My level P, like my first group, I don't benchmark them every week. In fact, I did it today, and it was, you know, it's like I went through one of my kiddos, and she was great. But my first group is the only one that I don't do running records every day.
so when they get to a
Okay.
certain point, then that's when you said move them up? Is that what you're saying? With your running record?
Based on the running record, yeah. You know, now that they're in the groups and we've kind of done our moving already,